Good morning, I'm Miss Tyler, and welcome to Context for Kids, Lesson 7, Vayetze, and he went out.
4, 3, 2, 1, 0.
Good morning, welcome to week 7 of Context for Kids. So this week's Torah portion is Genesis 28:10 through 32:2, but we're only going to be covering a very brief section of Genesis 28, dealing with Jacob's ladder. Now remember, if this is your first time through the Torah portions with little kids, you might want to check out my friend Sarah Hawks Valente's book, Lessons in Yeshua's Torah, which is available on Amazon.com, and it's going to help you out with the little ones. It can be kind of daunting to do for the first time, and even more so if you're doing it with kids, and she'll give you a hand. Anyway, so here we are with the life of Jacob now. We've been in the lives of Abraham and Sarah, who have died, and Isaac and Rebekah, who are getting older, and they're really out of the story from now on. Now we're into the stories of Jacob and his wives and his 12 sons. But most of Genesis will be dealing with Jacob and Joseph predominantly. And it's some of my favorite stories in the Bible. Yeah, I've said that before, but what can I do? I enjoy the Bible. Okay, so we're going to deal with Genesis 28. We're going to deal with Jacob's ladder. Now, why am I choosing Jacob's ladder? It's because it's one of those things that we've always just accepted, that Jacob saw a ladder in the sky. I don't know about you, but when I hear something enough times, I just accept it as truth. And from the time I grew up, I had heard about the ladder with the angels going up and into heaven and coming down from heaven. But what is the Hebrew word that is translated as ladder? The word is sulam, and interestingly, it only appears once in the entire Bible. Isn't that wild? Now, if you look into Strong's Concordance, it will say sulam equals ladder. But if you look into a language program like Logos, it says sulam means a stepped ramp or a flight of steps. So which is right? And why are they different? Well, I wanted to teach you something about Strong's Concordance, that this is something that you can carry with you in your Bible studies for the rest of your life. Now, Strong's Concordance, there's a difference between a concordance and a dictionary. A dictionary will give you a word, and it will give you all the definitions of the word. But a concordance isn't a dictionary. A concordance will just give you an alphabetical list of all the words that occur in a book. That's it. In the case of Strong's Concordance will, for the word sulam, will tell you every time sulam shows up, and it will show you the word that it's translated as. Do you see the difference? There's a difference between giving you a word that something is translated as and actually giving you the definition of that word. If you use the concordance as a dictionary, you will believe that sulam is a ladder. But sulam is only translated as ladder. A lot of times the King James translators, well, it wasn't a time where they were particularly interested in archaeology. And frankly, the reason that they found the New World in the first place was because they were looking all over Europe for a way to get to China without going around the Horn of Africa. The reason they were going around the Horn of Africa was because the Near East was a very dangerous place to travel through. The Ottomans had it all tied up. It was dangerous. You weren't safe caravanning your goods out there. It was very expensive. It took an incredibly long period of time, so they wanted to find another way to the Indies and to China. So that's what they were doing. They weren't going through that area. They weren't looking at ziggurats. They weren't interested. They didn't care. These translators were simply people who understood the general gist of Hebrew and Greek, and who spoke English, and they did the best they could. But they didn't know about things like ziggurats that we talked about in week 2, which have a stepped ramp, a flight of steps going up towards the heavens. Now remember, the Ziggurats were, in ancient Near Eastern thought, in the thoughts of pagans, the homes of the gods. They built these stepped, huge stepped monuments so that they could have a house up at the top for their god, and he could go down the steps to come to earth and go back up the steps to get to his heavenly abode. Now he was up there doing the, they thought he was out there in the cosmos doing the business of running his portion of the universe, whether it was to keep the sun moving through the sky, or keep the moon where it's supposed to be, or make sure that the crops grow. That was a big one. Or make sure that the rivers flow, the Tigris and the Euphrates. This was the most important things to them, to make sure that the cosmos kept functioning. They had this idea that their gods had to be kept taken care of, and that the gods would physically go up and come down. So it is no surprise that when God chose to talk to Jacob, he showed Jacob something that he understood, that everyone in those times understood. That the place he was standing was a place of gods, that the angels of God were coming down the steps and going up, doing the bidding of the God of his fathers, who appeared next to him. All right, so it's no wonder in verse 17 that Jacob says, look, this is the house of God, the gateway to heaven. Because that was the context at the time, Bible scholars just all agree that what Jacob saw was a ziggurat. Sometimes it's hard for us because we just assume that God speaks to everyone the exact same way. But if God was going to speak to you about shopping, what would he show you? He'd show you a supermarket or a mall. What would he show Jacob? He might show him a caravan coming through that he could trade with, or he might show him an outdoor bazaar in one of the bigger cities, but he wouldn't see a mall. We might see escalators instead of a stairway. God speaks to us according to our culture, because if he was to speak to us in our dreams according to what would have made sense to Jacob, we'd be mostly scratching our head. Well, what the heck is that? I've never seen that before. Why is he cutting critters in half? Speaks to us where we can understand. We're his kids. He's not going to speak to us in a foreign language. He's going to speak to us in the language we understand. And he did the same with Jacob. That was the world of the time. And so when Jacob saw a sulam to heaven, he saw a stepped ramp, a flight of steps to heaven. He saw a ziggurat. So when he saw the angels going down, coming up, that is exactly what that would have meant to him. So that is your quick. This one is shorter than normal, and I do apologize. I have been a little bit under the weather, and I'm having trouble with finding the energy today to give you a full 20 minutes. So it may be a couple of weeks before I'm back doing my normal 20-minute thing. But I hope you enjoyed this week's lesson, and I hope it taught you something. If nothing else, remember, you can't get definitions from a concordance. But if you ever have a word that you need to find, get a hold of me, and I will look it up, because I had some people who were very, very kind and bought logos for me. So that is it for this week. I will see you next week, and we're going to get deeper into the lives of Jacob and his wives and sons. Have a very wonderful week studying together. Bye-bye.